like to call this meeting to order. We'll have a roll call.
Lourdes?
I have?
Yeah,
Oh,
you
I
usually
can
do it.
I'll do it.
Okay.
Okay. Chair Hardy.
Present.
Vice Chair Ragsdale. We understand she's going to be.
I understand she'll be late. She has a priority setting with her city council.
Director Chambers.
Present.
Director Duncan. Director Pierce.
Here.
Director Schneider. Here. Director Stevenson. Director Bella. Here. Director Zichterman. Here. Great. We have a quorum?
We do, thank you. We are just recording today, so we are not transmitting. And we do not have anyone on Zoom, so we will be able to have a roll call. We won't have to do a roll call. We can just do a hands or eye vote today, which is nice. My first thought was to have everyone introduce themselves for our new member, but our new member isn't here, so we'll put that off. If they do show up, we will choose to do that later, but the rest of us are familiar faces, and I'm glad you found us all. It was a quick pivot, and I appreciate staff being as fast on the ball as possible, and all of you getting here, and I hope that your cars are safe, and some of us were smart and rode the train. Wonderful. But if there's any concerns, if someone needs to go out and feed a meter or something, please do so. Although this is a public meeting, we did have to ask them to prop that door open because there was a security emergency lock on there, and an alarm would have sounded. So don't anybody close that door. Thank you. Not that one, the other one from inside. Yeah, that one's okay. But yes, when I got here, I got to the door and I went, I probably better not touch this. And I came back and found someone. They said, you're right. An alarm would have gone off. I didn't want to get that kind of attention. All right, wonderful. So thank you all for being here. The Policy Board Committee, February 12th. And we started at 1:30. So I will, first we have the consent calendar. All we have on here is approval of minutes from December 11th, 2024. Are any questions, or do I have a motion? Luis? We are recording, so if you can turn on the, thank you.
I'll move to approve the consent consent calendar. Yeah.
Thank you. Luis made a motion.
Second.
Barbara? Barbara
Second.
seconds it. Barbara Pierce is second it. Since I try to keep this a little less formal when we're back and forth on Zoom, I do call you all directors, but when it's just us, I tend not to do that, I admit it. Wonderful. We have a motion. Do I have any questions? Do I have anyone from the public? Seeing nothing, I will call the question. All in favor? Say aye. Anyone opposed? Anyone abstained? That appears to be unanimous. Thank you so much. All right, public comment. Members of the public may address the committee on issues not on the agenda, but within the purview of the committee. Is there anyone in the public who would like to comment? I do not see anyone. All right, we will go on. Thank you so much. Gosh, that goes fast. All right, we're up to item number 5, action calendar. Results of the biannual staff level salary total compensation study. I'm not going to try and say that 3 times fast. My tongue's not that good. Tom, this is yours.
All right.
I should say Director Schmigel, but around
Former
here.
director, yeah, now he's in town. Okay, thank you. It's a quick update here. Every 2 years, we do a comparative salary study and look at the salary ranges that we have for our various staff members. We have the This year, Koff and Associates produced a report that was finalized in December. And the good news is that of our staff position, the types of positions that we have, there was only one where we were below the median of the comparative positions, and that was for our senior, senior water resources specialist/engineer. And so as a result, staff is recommending that the top step of that particular position be increased by 1.8% to bring that up to market median. Neither of the people that are in that position are at the top step, and so this has no effect on our budget, no effect on the salaries of individuals that are within the organization right now, but it's moving the top step up to median so that we have that opportunity as those staffers grow in responsibilities and experience, that we get that in the right place. And so that is our recommendation to the BPC. Sorry, I've got to do a lot of things at once here. You can see on the chart, this is the senior water resources specialist, the current and what the market median is, and that's a 1.8% difference. And so staff is recommending that the board policy committee recommend that the board approve adjustments to top step compensation for that one position.
Excellent. Thank you for that report. I found this to be very good news because we do have a small staff, but we expect a tremendous amount, and to make certain that we are competitive and compensating appropriately. We want to keep our brain trust here. Any questions or comments from Tom Z? Please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not as familiar with the public sector as I am in private, but I always ask this question when these kinds of surveys come up. Why are we shooting for the median?
It's an interesting question. I will tell you that in my municipality, we have problems with certain sectors wanting to be 5% above the median for everything, and every year we find that moves the needle, and it moves everybody's needle. And so in that way, it's become a feedback loop situation that has caused us nothing but issues. So I wouldn't say our staff is middle of the road. I would say that we are compensating appropriately for where we're at. If there's any other comments from.
The only other thing I would add is that there is some difficulty in cross-agency comparisons, right? These are positions that may not have exactly the same responsibilities as others in the various agencies. And we are pulling from the Bay Area, the other Bay Area water agencies. And so there's an uncertainty there. And in fact, if you look at what the recommendation is, in general, they would like to see the staff within plus or minus 5% of median. So it's kind of, there's some wiggle room in there. And so we're kind of picking median because maybe we're guessing that there's some uncertainty.
Okay, so I'll clarify. I would hope that we would pay our staff above median, not why are we shooting to get up to median. So, and I guess I would point out that in a very large public agency, maybe median makes sense. In a smaller, much smaller agency with this staff, very few doing a broad scope of work, as CEO Smeagol's saying, the slots don't quite line up with 4 or 5 other agencies to compare. They're doing a lot, wearing a lot of hats. I would just suggest we consider maybe doing a little bit more, but I don't know if that involves some kind of a policy shift, or is it just year by year we can decide we think 2% above median is fine, or median is back down to median is okay in different years. So my suggestion would be to just see what others think about maybe we bump up to 2% above or something to give the latitude to the CEO to have a little, this is the top rate. And so we're not adjusting individuals. We're saying you have more latitude to work people up to that level. I'm just concerned that we may lose people if we don't compensate them adequately. That's all.
I completely concur, especially when we have a small but mighty staff who does an amazing amount of work, and as you said, pivots very quickly. As us being in this room within just a few short hours of being told you can't be where you normally are. So I recognize that. I think that's probably a good feedback for the executive director to keep that in line and keep that when we go through the budget. Any
Sorry,
thoughts?
one more
Yes.
request. Maybe this is just informational. We're not acting on this today?
Well,
Are we
right
acting?
now, we are acting on just a recommendation after that, looking at
For the-
everything that
for the
this
one
one position.
Yeah.
Because I remember a couple years ago, a bunch of our positions were really low.
Yeah.
And we fixed that.
Yeah. Okay.
And I felt much better about that.
In going back over this 2 years ago, there was at least one position that was almost 8% below. So we did adjust at that time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Almost all the positions.
All right. Then I'm supportive of this, and just keep in mind that maybe next time
Yeah.
we look higher. Thank you.
I appreciate that. When you said you're supportive, did I hear a motion or not? Okay. Tom, please. Tom Chambers.
Right. I just wanted to say that, realize this is only top step, and that everybody isn't at top step, and that CEO has the option of paying. And so I think that this is, working with median is also much better than mean, because of outliers and that kind of stuff. So I support this, and in the future, when we get people near top step, we want to take a look at going above top step, I think the CEO can ask us. So,
Yeah.
But if nobody else has anything to say, I'd like to make the motion to approve, to recommend to the board that we approve the adjustment to top step for the position identified.
Excellent. So I have a motion to recommend to the rest of the committee that they approve the adjustments to the top step compensation. Tom?
Second.
And then Ann. Oh, I apologize, Ann. You turned it that way. Shame on me. Ann, please. Do I have a second to the motion? Oh, Tom did second that. Thank you. Please, Ann. And we did know, we really missed you.
I appreciate what you said. In terms of the top step, then that either means that we have to look at additional steps, which would be an action item for the future on that, or an additional position title. And I haven't dived into that, but if it wants to come back, clearly we want to make sure that we keep staff on that. I will say that I always talk to my entity about this, and they're perfectly comfortable with 1.8, but I couldn't do any other action today other than that, because I always confer with them. But I'm happy to, well, it got seconded. So,
Yes.
ready to vote.
Wonderful. I like that enthusiasm. Thank you so much. All right. I don't see any other comments. Any comments from the public on the motion? I do not see any. And we'll call the question. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? I do not see any. Any abstentions? That seems to be unanimous. Thank you. Appreciate that. All right, moving right along. Now the heart and the meat of the meeting. Reports and discussion items, preliminary fiscal year, work plan, and results to be achieved. Go for it.
All right. A long title for a long presentation. I did try to make it a bit shorter than last year's presentation that Nicole gave, but you'll have to confer with her to determine whether it's actually shorter. The key points to make here in this introductory slide are that our preliminary work plan aligns with the goal. And the 3 goal elements of reliable supply of high quality water at a fair price. Table 1 in the memo in the packet presents our work plan, and I'll go through that today. And then in the memorandum that was in the packet, we also talked about activities that were not included. I'm not planning to go through that today, but I could answer questions if you had them about that. We tried to address critical issues that were identified, and that is informed by the challenges that the board and the board policy committee have seen over the last couple of meetings. And we've incorporated or evaluated the remarks that were made at the board meeting in setting these topics. The 2 big items continue from the last fiscal year, the BAWSCA Strategy 2050 and the updated regional water demand projections. So you'll see that throughout here. We have a couple of other what I would term minor in terms of workload items. I hope to evaluate the regional financing authorities, what they can do, what they're legally allowed to do under their founding documents, and with help from our engaged consultant KNN to facilitate future financing efforts. And there are a number of different irons in the fire with respect to that. We will be talking about those over the next months and years. And then the last bullet is to move from working through the water supply amendments and the Tier 2 plan to implementing and executing on the water supply amendments for minimum purchase quantities and the updated Tier 2 plan, as we anticipate that those will be completed within this fiscal year, which ends in June. As I mentioned already, this reflects the input that was provided, and we did provide a chart in the memo as well, talking about what were the items that were mentioned by the board and how they're incorporated into the work plan. We also include, as was requested last year, and we thought it was good practice to continue to provide this, but it's a staff resource analysis that shows the staff loading and then how the staff is spending its time based upon the different mechanisms. I have slides on those. So I'm just going to kind of wade through most of this you've seen before. Most of this is not new. We've tried to highlight the items that are new in this case. So we're looking at item 1, which is the facility reliability in reliable water supply. So monitoring SFPUC's WISA 10-year CIP, asset management program, and emergency response. We've added an item F here, which is to engage with SFPUC on their preparation of the 2026 State of the Regional Water System Report. So in this last fiscal year, we were evaluating and commenting on, providing comments back to SFPUC on their 2024 State of the Water System report. They'll be preparing that starting to prepare that in the fiscal period, and we'll be engaging with them on that report. So implementing the strategy for long-term water supply solutions. A and B have been changed. I'll talk about them in a minute. And the only change there is the word continue instead of the word initiate. So we didn't highlight those. I've got separate slides on those. Then what I just spoke about was the initial scoping evaluation of what's the authority available to the RFA. How can we assist in financing various types of projects in the future? So the continued development of Strategy 2050 is included in the work plan, but it's separately budgeted. Remember, we established the water management charge to fund this project. So most of the work is being done by a consultant. ETAI is the leading consultant on this under contract. So the budget that you will eventually see as we get to the final budget will not include the dollars for this project because it's separately allocated out of the water management charge. What you do see is the staff loading. So when we get to the charts, the staff time and the staff time on each objective includes this amount, but it does not. It's not included in the dollars of the base budget. I wanted to make clear that that was separately calculated. Similarly, we are continuing development of the updated regional water demand projections, and this will go. This will be completed around the end of the calendar year, is our anticipated target. And this is very important both for Strategy 2050, for the member agencies' urban water management plans, other regional planning efforts. It's closely coordinated with San Francisco and their forecasting and their planning as well. And again, work is being done in the current fiscal year, and there'll be work in the next fiscal year. And you can see there is a cost associated with that estimated here in the 25-26 fiscal year. There was a similar cost in the 24-25 fiscal year for this project. So this is not representing an increase in cost, but a continuing cost that was in the budget in this last year. So next we have near-term supply solutions, particularly water conservation and drought responses. Essentially no changes to this category. Item 4 is protecting members' water supply and financial interests in the WSA administration. And here is where we've added work products or changed the work items to reflect implementation of the updated Tier 2 plan and engagement with the SFPUC and BAWSCA member agencies on implementation of the WSA amendment that would alter the calculation and assessment of MPQ, the minimum purchase quantities, for four of the member agencies. So really it's the same work that we've been doing, but it's a furthering of that work, just a different characterization of that work. These next three, again, these are routine kinds of things. There's no changes here in protecting, participating in the Bay Delta and grant opportunities and reporting and tracking. Those are the same for the next fiscal year. Similarly, communication on water quality issues, no changes that the staff is proposing here. The next item is delegated responsibilities. Again, the delegated responsibilities are known, and there's no changes to the work items associated with our delegated responsibilities. We do, however, get into a little bit of a new topic here. And I think it's a bit of a minor topic. This is managing the activities of the agency. So we have a single individual among our staff of 9 that is assigned human resources responsibilities. And that is a little bit risky, to be honest, to have that person have no backup. And we also saw in the last calendar year that an item came up with respect to the CalPERS understanding of our salary bands and the publication of that and following all the arcane rules associated with that. And so what we're hoping to do is to look at other small agencies like ourselves, identify management, assistive management of human resources that's out there by contract, and that would be. And we're hoping to get some insights, possibly from some of the member agencies, but also from Hanson Bridget, who has experience working with agencies with small staff, just to understand what is the range of services that could be provided in support of our internal human resources, and really try to understand what the spectrum is out there. So that's an item that we do hope to work on, hope to make some progress with, and it really does add to the agency resiliency. We've talked over the last couple of years about the agency resiliency. One of the hopes is that you have more than one person that is responsible and able to do the things that you need to do in any circumstance. So that when I hear resiliency, I do get a little uncomfortable having only one person with the special knowledge. And so to have backup, to have support, to have some things that that person doesn't necessarily need to do all the time might be helpful. So I'm talking about it a lot. Maybe sounds big, but I don't think it's going to end up being a huge work item for us. But it's a change. So I mentioned up top that we also looked at staff hours by task and how much the staff is loaded. We have a couple of charts that were in the memo and are in here. The first shows by staffer, not identified by name, but I'm identified by name over on the left. This is actually a bit more moderate than what we proposed last year. Looking back at the presentation materials, these numbers were all a little bit higher. And so we've made some improvements. We've made some, Tom and his staff and Christina and Deb have looked through and really honed this a little bit. So last year, this chart didn't even show people at 100%. They were at 110%. So I'm happy that we're getting a little bit more reasonable. I'm obviously personally relatively new to the staff, interacting with them on a daily basis for a couple of months now. Certainly cognizant of staff members who say, help, I'm doing too much or whatever. And so I'll continue to evaluate that. But this is the profile that we have now. And this is a little hard to read. There's a lot of numbers on here. But this is essentially how we divide our staff hours. And so you can see, it's probably just under 50% is on long-term and near-term supply solutions, whether that's the strategy and the WISIP and the and the conservation efforts, and then you can see the others that are along there. Tom, essentially no changes from last year, not significant changes in how we have deployed our staff. So as we go through this process, this is a look at our work plan activities, and we're looking forward, after I stop talking, to hearing from members of the BPC about any additional work tasks that they feel might be necessary or anything that might be less of a priority. But we will continue over the next couple of meetings approaching let me jump to the next slide for this. The preliminary budget is going to be next month in March, presented to the board, and potential funding for that budget. Then we'll be coming back to BPC in April, kind of for a final go-around, and then a final approval of the budget in May. I will remind you all that we are funded by the member agencies and assessments on the member agencies. Apart from the Strategy 2050 project, it's the assessment, the general assessment. Last year we adopted a 9% increase in the assessment, and we're operating from reserves to some extent. So we felt that was, I think I was not, it was in between my involvement. I wasn't on the board and I wasn't the CEO. But I think the board felt at that time that that was the max that could be increased in terms of the assessment. So we will be looking at the operating budget and evaluating opportunities to either raise the assessment or keep the assessment where it is, and give the board some opportunities, some options, so to speak. But you can see that in 2024-25, the budget was $5.6 million. The assessments were $5.3 million. So we were relying on pulling about $300,000 out of reserves. And I mentioned the next steps, and further discussion will come at the March and April and May meetings. Good. So that is the end of that presentation. Happy to take any thoughts that any of the members have.
Thank you, Tom. Ann, and then Tom Z.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. A couple of questions, mainly in light of what's happening at the federal level and how that may come down and impact local governments as well as BAWSCA. When we're looking at water reuse projects, where I assume that a good deal of that funding is federal funding that may go away, how will that impact this work plan and our budget? And I know it's speculation at this point. I just know what we're trying to do, even if it's I'm a little rusty on my terminology with a month off. A WITSEA loan? Is that? A WIFIA loan. You know, even if that program is shut down, that could make some of that work, which is important, but could make it more difficult.
Great. I'm looking like Tom is ready to respond, so I'm going to let Tom respond here.
You saw me reach for the microphone, and I saw you scratch your head and think I'm going to ask Tom. The monies in the budget that we have for the sort of the potable reuse projects that you see, those are planning monies, and we had not, as a group, collectively, because it's not just BAWSCA, had not envisioned applying for any grants at this time or for the next couple of years.
Okay.
Of course, that doesn't negate your comment that, you know, many water agencies or wastewater agencies are uncertain in terms of how much money from the federal government could be available in the future. I think we as water agencies are very fortunate to live in California, where the state has fairly robust grant programs or funding programs for both wastewater and water. But again, we have not envisioned for this year or really for the next couple of years that we would be seeking grant monies for those projects that are part of our budget.
Thank you. Moving on to slide 18, near-term supply solutions. The participation in San Mateo CCAG One Watershed Program. As a former member of CCAG and the chair of one committee, I'm also less sure about CCAG's funding. What does this actually mean, and what are we on the stake for? Are we at risk at all for that? I love the idea that we're looking at stormwater and everything together. I mean, I truly love that. But again, in this time frame, I'm curious.
This is also Tom, so.
I know. Well, I will, you know, I'll give our new CEO credit. Next week, he will be meeting with the Resource Management and Climate Protection Committee, which is essentially the CCAG group. So you are going to become more and more up to speed, I have no doubt. But in terms of that effort, BAWSCA is providing essentially staffing support. We're part of, I guess I'd say, the regional partners that CCAG and their staff are doing, implementing a grant that was awarded from the state of California, the Office of Planning Research, I think. That apparently is not risking any shortfalls. We actually had a meeting with the state grant staff. They're very pleased with the status of the work to date that the staff of CCAG are doing on that stormwater program. I'm really excited for it, and I know there's going to be kind of a next phase in the next year or so where they're actually going to implement a pilot project in the city of San Bruno. And so there'll be much more, I think, to share with you folks around the room in terms of what's happening, what are they doing.
Great. I would only add that our assemblywoman for this district is the chair of, and I'm going to get the committee's name wrong, it's Water, Natural Resources and Wildlife, I think, but it's something along that line. And Assemblywoman Pappen attended a park opening we just had, and I think it might be good for you to meet with her.
Well, good
And
news,
if I can help arrange that, I'm happy to.
good news is I've already met with her
Oh, good.
a couple times.
Okay.
So I've seen her a couple times, so recognize that she's a strong partner to BAWSCA, and obviously her family has a strong history of.
Yep, the
relationship
Pappens do
with
have a
BAWSCA.
lineage there. So, well, good. I forgot about that. So, great. With that, I like this. I like the idea of the outsourcing a little bit of human resources. All of us who represent small cities, my guess is we're all kind of looking at that because we don't have enough staff to do things, but we don't want to add headcount / pension. So if this is that option for that, that seems like a good way. So thank you.
I did see your reaction to that. Yeah, for the smaller municipalities, we were saying that just looking into this may be good information for several of us, because humans can be interesting and fun to deal with, right? Tom C., please.
Thank you, Chair. Just so a question before I opine a little bit. How do you intend to close the gap between the projected number of staff hours on this work plan and a full-time job of, say, 40 hours a week? You're up to 150, 135, 100, a couple and 120%. It's a big gap.
I'm going to say, I just ran the numbers too, because I had the same thought. It's 100,
10.7, yeah.
it's 120, not counting yours. It's 124 over 100 for each total.
Yeah.
So,
So you know where I'm going.
great question.
Well, I mean, it's a totally fair question. What I would say is that the two biggest bars there are Tom and myself. And we have some overlapping responsibilities. We have a lot of juggling that we have to do. And so, I mean, just to give an example of yesterday, we were trying to manage, both of us, listening into some parts of the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission meeting. Now, the good news is that they live stream that and provide for remote participation. You know, that's a technology they have. And so we were able to kind of work on some other things while we were waiting for an opportunity to speak or listening in. And so we do have to manage like that. We have to juggle maybe doing two things at once to some extent, or maybe trading off which of us goes to certain things. So
Yeah.
I'm admitting that I'm fairly new at this, as you know, and I hope to come back to you in a year from now with a different number, and try to see where can we squeeze, where can we be more realistic about some of these things. But I recognize that's a big burden at the moment, particularly for the two of us. I think it's certainly something we have to manage with the staff, and Tom manages about half the staff. So again, those that have 120%, I mean, I think they know that, and they have to prioritize. You know, so.
Okay, well, sorry, I'm going to opine a little bit. I just went through this with my staff. I got a couple dozen people. And in the last year or two, it seems we've really ramped up the workload without a recognition of the impact on people's lives. I had one staffer take another job. Others were in my office once a month in tears. I don't want to get there. I don't want anybody to get there. So you might notice a theme looking at my compensation comments and this. It's pretty obvious to me that you're gonna meet the work plan or you're not. So is this setting us up for either burning out people or not adequately addressing the work plan? I think we're all pretty sure we need all of the work plan stuff done. So scope has to be accomplished, but at what cost? So I guess what I'd like to suggest here is that we consider that we need another staff. If this is a short-term hiatus in workload because of Bay Delta and other things, and in a couple of years this is going to get back down, maybe it's a 2-year fixed term instead of a permanent FTE. But I don't know why we would want to set ourselves up. I'm not going to question your workload efforts. You know that better than anybody. But it looks to me like we're either going to have an inadequately addressed work plan or high potential of burned out people. And neither one of those, if we can somehow avoid it from the start, would be, I think, appropriate. And we're a policy group here. So my policy suggestion is either reduce their workload or let's give some staff support somehow, or look for outside help to relieve this workload. Because in my mind, long-term staff preservation is much more valuable than a short-term either burnout or inadequately accomplished work plan. So I'll leave it at that.
If I could address just
Yes,
one more
please.
thing, because you did bring up a good point. We are involved in two major projects which are out of the regular, out of the norm. And we do have consultants that are working on those, but it takes staff hours to manage consultants. And so we've tried as best I think we can to alleviate some of the concerns on those staff for having those extra projects. But I know, for instance, especially as this Tier 1, Tier 2 issue, the water supply agreement and the drought allocation, as those have extended beyond what we expected, that has been a burden on staff, because staff members that we have working on that probably should be working on another thing, so we're aware of those. I do think some of them are short-term because of those major projects that we're working on. Again, I will continue to watch that and monitor that. I don't know about a recommendation to add a person. I'd have to get together with Tom and figure out where that would be, if that would be valuable to us.
Thank you. I had the same thought, because if you notice on the slide, it said BAWSCA approved staff level is 9 FTE, and estimated staff hours are 10.7 FTE, and I had written next to it intern with a big question mark, wondering if this was.
We do have an internship program, so we
Yeah.
do expect at least an
Maybe
intern.
some help during
Yeah.
the summer.
Yes.
Yeah, wonderful. Barbara, please.
Well, and this is like a redo of what we saw last year. And there were a couple of things as you're presenting for the board meeting. You might remind everybody, there was phasing that Nicole implemented so that it delayed some of the work. Hopefully some of the other work was getting done, and then there was a phasing of efforts. I don't know if that's still appropriate for looking at for this year or not. Some other things that had come up in a previous discussion, and you might remember this, Tom, was the idea of looking for some temporary, and I forget what the word was. There was another word that we used. So a skilled temporary person who doesn't really want to be fully employed, but is willing to come in for, yeah, like a subcontract, who's knowledgeable and who would be here for 6 or 8 months to get through some of the work. So, and I don't know, Nicole would probably remember who was contacted or not, and whether that turned out to be doable or just a really good idea. One of those kinds of things. And so I think that's helpful. And then I think the board also, at that point, had also talked about the idea of perhaps increasing 1 FTE. So those were kind of the different options that had come up before. And so maybe, I don't know, I don't know how much time tier 2 is going to take. At this point, there's a lot to get through getting it passed, but I think those were some of the options and talking points.
Go ahead.
Sure,
Finish your thought.
No, I'm done with that.
Okay, I just was going to add, we
Sure.
do have several safety valves, so I know
Okay.
for Christina and Tom,
Yeah.
in their major core areas, they have consultants that they work with that can alleviate some of that workload if necessary.
Okay.
And they're there to do
Yeah.
a particular task, but they can be given more task if there's too much for Tom and Christina to do, for example.
Right,
So there are safety valves built into the way that it's been structured.
right,
And again, I'm just delving into this for the
Yeah.
first time.
right.
obviously.
No,
So,
and that's perfectly reasonable, and it was just the things that I remembered the last time that we went through this, because as you said, the numbers got better, but they're not great yet. On a separate item, if you're going to use these slides for the board meeting, on page 7, the one where it talks about major tasks in preliminary federal year 25-26 work plan, I think it says Pure Water Peninsula portable reuse, and I believe potable is, it
Yeah.
might be good if it was portable, but I don't know.
Water is not very portable, is it? We noticed that this morning and fixed it on the
Oh, you fixed it
overhead.
there
We
with your-
fixed it on the overhead,
Okay.
but in the printout, it didn't get caught.
Portable, I thought it was a great idea. Portable.
Spell check only works if the wrong word isn't a word.
Right, no, I just went through a document
Yeah.
of my own today, and I'm like, oh, well, that really didn't make sense today. Yeah.
I know who the editor of the group is.
And then I'm trying to see whether there was one. Oh, I really liked in your board, there were a couple of things in the packet that were really well phrased, and I really thought it was really compelling. so I want to support that. So like, on page 20, the last paragraph where it says, in each case, the results will take the form of agreements, legislation, and stuff. It's like, this is perfect, because this is something that is not always easy for board members to grasp, and they don't see what it takes to get all this stuff done. So that last sentence that begins table 5 that was a great sentence. And then there's another one somewhere where you talked about ensuring that the level of service goals were met. And so I thought that that's a critical piece that we have to keep reminding ourselves of. So thank you. I think that's all of my comments.
She just proved to us she read her reports.
I did. I did read my.
Wonderful. I'd like the record to state that Dr. Leslie Ragsdale came in at 2:15. Sorry about that. Yeah. I was going to say director, and it came out doctor, and there you go. Director Ragsdale did come in at 2:15. Thank you. We knew you had a priority setting. You let us know about that. And we're excited that you found us, even though we're hiding in a cave, a beautiful cave, but
I'd like to commend the library for the amazing signage for this room.
yes. Well, you missed it, but when they had the door shut, there's an alarm. There's all these signs pointing to it, but it says if you push this door, the alarm will go off. So I got them to open that door so that we didn't have any alarms going off. Yes, I would agree. Thank you so much. Just to let you know, we are just working on 6A. We've been looking at our preliminary fiscal year work plan and the results to be achieved. And that's where we're at. And we were just on the feedback presenting from the results, and we're giving some suggestions, as always, because we are really good at suggestions and feedback. Anne, please. Oh, I'm so sorry, Tom. I need to, and we should get him the other.
I just wanted to say one quick thing. We're talking about personnel and staffing, and I think one of the key things that we're talking about is contracting out some of the human resources stuff. And as we said before, you get in trouble with human resources if you don't do it right. And, it can be expensive if you don't do it right. And I think that will decrease those percentages a little bit, so we're going to get better than last year, and next year's better than this year, and the year after next will be better than next year.
Thank you. Thank you for catching that, Anne. I appreciate that. Go ahead, please.
So Director Pierce reminded me that we had the chart from the January meeting, so I apologize I wasn't there. But reading what Director Weed said about PFAS concerns, and it may not be a function of this organization at all, but I wonder if there is room to start a program to reduce or source reduce PFAS right now. I say that because I've been following artificial turf installation in California since we were the first city to ban the use of it. And my belief is that eventually we'll be cleaning up that plastic out of the ocean. And it'll come down as a cost to all cities to do that. So it's better and cheaper to do it ahead of time. Now, I'm not too worried about PFAS getting up into Hetch Hetchy, although they are in the atmosphere. And I'm wondering, in our water conservation plan, is there room or is there an organization out there that is looking at how to reduce PFAS? And that may, again, a bigger subject here. Now that I'm, quote, retired, I will add it to my list from my old recycling habits that, again, source reduction is better than recycling on that. So just when I saw that mention of PFAS and there's so many unknowns, could we even have a workshop or someone come in and talk at a full board member meeting and talk about PFAS and how they're entering into the water supply? And that might be something that each of our member agencies could build into their own education programs. Since we count a lot on BAWSCA's education programs, and we're grateful for them, we might need to go a step farther, or we're going to pay for it much more in the future. Thank you.
Yes, please, Tom.
I will say that we've, at the staff level and with the water management representatives, we've been talking about new regulations that are associated with our Strategy 2050 project. And I know, I'm going to put Negin on the spot here, but I know that we did an evaluation based upon a survey of our member agencies from the staff, from their staff survey. And that did pop out as one of the areas that they're interested in, potentially interested in help from us. I think we have to rank and prioritize, and when I say that, I mean PFAS in general, not necessarily source reduction. I don't know, Negin, did that make the top 6 regulations, or did it just?
It didn't make the top
quite?
6,
Okay,
yes.
but it's certainly something that's of concern to some of the folks within the BAWSCA region. And it would be of a concern, and you'll hear Director Weed say this, it's a concern with recycled water projects, whenever you're taking wastewater, which could have that in it, or some other, if you're using stormwater as a water source, you'd be worried about that too. So, right, so we're aware of that as an issue. I think that's on the minds of the agency's water management reps for sure. Okay. It may not be something that BAWSCA is able to do anything about, but certainly we have that water management rep meeting, and there's been a level of concern there where it's appropriate for us to interject some information or coordination. We'd be potentially happy to do that.
And if I can add, quarterly we also have the SFPUC BAWSCA Water Quality Committee meeting is actually next week, and that's a regular topic that we talk about.
Yes, please. There's some
Having
follow-up.
been in my field for over 40 years, it's funny, we always go to education before regulations come on that. And yet, and again, I'm a little bit still on vacation mode, I cannot think of what would be the top ways to reduce PFAS other than some things that we did to stop chemicals from going down the toilet, killing the good bacteria in water pollution plants. So we did some work on that a good 20 years ago, Daly City being a lead, and Concord or something over in the East Bay on that, I mean nationally or internationally. So it could be just a few little things, and I'll just put it in the back of my mind on there that there might be some, hey public, don't flush your meds, but also don't do X, Y, Z. And it might start as easy as that while we wait for regulations, because regulations follow a long time sometimes. Thank you.
Thank you. My daughter has a wonderful phrase. She said, for every law or rule, there's a really sad story. And usually it's in the rearview mirror thinking, we don't want this to happen again, but I can appreciate the forward looking. And I serve on the water treatment plant, and very clearly they said, whatever comes out of you and the toilet paper, that's all that should go down the toilet, because, and I thought that was a good way to put that. Anything else is not appropriate. So, yeah. And I'm not quite certain how we can yet put that on a billboard in an appropriate way. I'll let you work on that in your retirement. I was going to ask if we could go back one slide. And I had the one heartburn I had after worrying about our staff overdoing them. That was one of them. The other one was we had a 9% increase, but we see our operating budget and our assessments. And I see a bit of a disconnect. And this may lead into what we'll be talking about later, but I wondered how we were going to handle that.
Yeah,
I guess.
so I don't want to prejudge what's going to come out of the budgeting process. We still have a couple more I's to dot and T's to cross with respect to that. But in that last fiscal year, the board agreed that the $300,000, removing that from the reserve was appropriate, left the organization with a level of reserve that was appropriate within the range that we'd like to see, and that range is 20 to 35% reserve. So I think right now we have a 24% of our operating budget in reserve in the bank, so to speak. So that's always going to be a balancing act, and that is obviously in this last year was helpful in avoiding having a very large increase to try to balance the budget exactly. But we'll get the numbers for you in the upcoming months to see how we're doing for this next year.
Thank you. Balancing is always what we're trying to do. Barbara, please.
Well, and one of the things that always makes it a little challenging for us with the budgeting is that there's sometimes money that isn't spent in the current year, and it doesn't get deposited until after, or really close to when we're doing the budget, though Nicole sometimes had an idea about it.
Right.
And the board seemed comfortable in the past, and I think it has to be phrased gently, I guess, that we have funded from the reserve in the past, and it's for, sit on.
Okay.
For specific kinds of things, if it's not going to be ongoing and things like that. So that when you're talking about it, I think that helps for us to remember that.
Thank you. Well, and it will also lead into our next discussion over what's next on our agenda. I don't see any other people that want to speak. Do I have anyone from the public who wants to talk about this or anything else? Okay, and I appreciate that. Tom, do you feel like you got the feedback you were looking for and the suggestions and concerns?
I did, thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely, wonderful. Next, we'll go to 6B, BAWSCA's pension liability alternative funding options.
Thank you, Director Hardy.
Yes,
Good afternoon,
please, Christy.
everyone. So at the board meeting last November, the board asked staff to analyze options available for BAWSCA to consider additional funding can be used to pay down our unfunded pension liability faster than the current approach. So based on the current CalPERS amortization schedule, our projected unfunded liability as of June 30, 2025 is $1,264,815, and the UAL represents the liability for service that has been earned but not funded. And the CalPERS minimum required employer contribution for towards paying down the UAL for fiscal year 25-26 is $106,946. So BAWSCA's unfunded liability is currently estimated to be paid off by 2045 based on a discount rate of 6.8%. And I just want to make a note here that the UAL is an actuarial value and it fluctuates over time based due to variety of factors that including the market condition, CalPERS assumption, actuarial assumptions, and their actual investment performance. So in light of the rise and volatility of CalPERS pension liability, many public agencies have voluntarily chosen to contribute or set aside additional funding to help them address their long-term pension liability issue. As requested by the board, so BAWSCA staff, we identified 4 options available at this time. Option 1 is to make additional discretionary payments to CalPERS to reduce the pension liability. So CalPERS allows employer to make those ADPs at any time in any amount. And making an ADP during a fiscal year does not require an ADP to be made any future years. Option 2 is to re-amortize the annual UAL amortization schedule. So based on the alternative, maybe supposedly shorter term. So if BAWSCA would like the June 30, 2025 UAL to be paid off in less than 20 years before 2025, that means its minimum annual UAL payment is going to be a higher amount. So because the UAL fluctuates, as mentioned earlier, the post-reamortization minimum annual UAL payment is expected to change from year to year. And option 3 is to establish an irrevocable pension pre-funding trust to offset the future pension liability. The additional funds set aside in the trust, including the interest earnings, will serve as the contingency funds available to mitigate the volatility for any agency's long-term pension contribution needs in the future. But the funds accumulated in the trust do not directly reduce the UAL or have any impact on CalPERS' estimated UAL paid-off schedule presented in its annual actuarial valuation report, unless the funds in the pension trust are used to pay down the UAL. Per BAWSCA's actuary, the irrevocable pension trust only makes sense if the agency expects to make a significantly higher investment return in the trust than CalPERS' current amortization rate. So given CalPERS' current expected 6.8% return and the size of BAWSCA's UAL, the irrevocable pension trust is determined not appropriate this time. Option 4 are the pension obligation bonds. They are long-term bonds issued to prepay all or a portion of the UAL. According to BAWSCA's financial advisor, these kind of bonds are typically sold at taxable rates, and when taxable rates were significantly lower than the interest rate used in the UAL amortization. With the rise in the interest rates following 2021 and the size of our UAL, so this kind of bond is determined not cost effective at this time. So this table is shown as table 1 in the staff report. So it illustrates the estimated present value savings based on the 3 alternative amortization terms under each of option 1 and option 2, comparing against the current CalPERS minimum funding approach. So under the current approach, which is the row starting with minimum only, so under the current approach, so CalPERS amortized the UAL payment by 20 years as a default. That's why the projected June 30, 2025 UAL is estimated to be paid off by 2045. CalPERS required total contribution from BAWSCA in fiscal year 25-26 is $286,000, which is the sum of the estimated normal cost of $179,000. That represents the value of benefits being earned by employees during the current year, and the minimum UAL payment of about $107,000. But please note here, so BAWSCA is required to pay the normal cost in full each year. So therefore, no matter what amortization term it's selected for the agency, the normal cost each year remains the same. And the estimated savings on this slide are basically from the interest savings from the UAL only. Regarding the 2 options that we have analyzed, option 1, 2, you may have noticed, so the present value savings under both option 1 and option 2 are the same. So that's because the scenarios used under the ADP method assume consistent annual ADP contributions following the re-amortization schedule, same as option 2. So for example, if BAWSCA choose to re-amortize the payment to be paid off by the liability to be paid off by June 30, 2040, under option 2, the estimated annual UAL payment would be $132,684 for the next 15 years, in addition to the required payment towards normal cost. So the overall present value savings are estimated to be $13,000. However, if BAWSCA doesn't want to make a commitment to increase the UAL payment every year, and we can make an ADP payment any amount, anytime, assuming the annual ADP payment is always equal to what the annual UAL payment would be under option 2, minus the minimum UAL payment based on the current 20-year amortization schedule for the next 15 years, the results would be the same. So that basically how we calculated the annual ADP, consistent ADP payment for the next 15 years. The results would be the same. The present value would be 13,000, and the June 30, 2025 UAL would be estimated to be paid off by 2040. But please note, I said June 30, 2025 UAL estimated to be paid off. I didn't say UAL to be paid off. That's because the factor we mentioned earlier, UAL fluctuates over time. So no matter what happened, we always will see a UAL amount in our CalPERS actuarial valuation report, because that amount, either negative or positive, it's based on CalPERS actuarial assumptions and also CalPERS actual investment performance in the past 12 months. So on the other hand, if BAWSCA prefers both flexibility and also plans to have a targeted shorter-term UAL paid off year, so BAWSCA can work with CalPERS actuary to recalculate the UAL based on a decreasing amortization schedule. So we can always aim for what's our informal targeted sooner paid off time for the UAL. So the next steps are feedback from the BPC on the alternative fundings. It's requested. And your guidance on how staff should incorporate this into the preparation of the 25-26 operating budget would also be helpful.
Thank you, Christina. I appreciate this, going through this, because I like to plan ahead, and I'm horrified when I see entities that put on blinders and say, oh, it's not in this year's budget, and kicking that can down the road. At some point, you can't do that anymore. So I appreciate you looking at this up. Ann, please.
Thank you. A couple of quick questions. On option one, we haven't been doing that. My agency does do that, and it's a question of timing, because you can save quite a bit on that. So clearly, my agency is in support of option one. I think you made a great argument about option two and why one or two. So I would definitely be on the support of option one. To me, it gives us more flexibility to move with however much money we've got coming in. The question on option three, my agency has told me they support that and have done that. I don't believe the city of Millbrae has it, but our city manager at previous locations has had that trust fund. But my questions, without having a discussion with him, is can we use excess reserves to move into that trust fund? That's one question, just how would we fund it? But number two, what is the cost for setting up a trust fund, and does the cost take away any advantage we would have for creating a trust fund? So those are just my questions, and right now my agency is an absolute no on option four. So yes on one, yes on three, and great argument why option two doesn't seem to be necessary.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Christina, you're keeping track of the question. Okay, excellent. Any other questions? I'm not seeing any at this point. I know this is something I raised. I was very concerned about it. And I liked the option one, since we had a lot more flexibility. As I read through, even before I got to we don't suggest 3 and 4, I remember thinking, I'm not certain. And then when I got down to it, this doesn't look like a good idea. But I likened it to making extra payments on a house and saving that 6.8, yeah, percentage on the interest, because we can shorten our time. But then knowing that once you've done that, that takes away some liquidity. So being very careful. That's why I really like the option. And I know I paid off my house 8 years earlier because I handled it this way. And so I am personally feel very strongly that it can make a difference. So, Tom Z., please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm kind of out of my field here, but just, first of all, 2 questions. First of all, wondering if there are any legal perspectives about where we're at now or these options that we should consider.
Okay. Yeah.
All the options are fine. I think given the size of your liability, 3 and 4 don't make a lot of sense. Like the cost benefit doesn't make a lot of sense.
Thank you.
Okay.
Tom.
Thank you, sorry.
Please,
Second one,
Tom
real
Z.,
quick,
keep
is,
going. I want to make certain I apologize to Tom Z.
I guess more the financial perspective, Christina, or your consultants working with you, are there concerns about not having ours paid off until 2045? Or, I mean, should we be shooting for something less, or is this a typical condition of agencies that we're 20 years out from catching up?
I believe based on the current like accounting guidelines, there is no requirement for any agency to like, you definitely have to like pay off your unfunded pension liability by what? So the only requirement is you have to show that unfunded liability on your financial statements.
The one thing that I'll add from our discussions is that we do have to be careful if we choose option 1, because if we deposit extra money, CalPERS will recalculate the 20-year amortization. So essentially, they'll give you a smaller minimum to pay in future years, unless you tell them that your objective is to shorten that time period. So if we choose option 1, Christina's going to have to work with them to make sure that they know, if we pay them an extra $50,000 or $100,000, they aren't just going to reduce the amount that we pay over the next 20 years.
Thank you. Good point. Tom C., please.
Okay, I'm a fan of option 1 if we're going to be doing it, although I hate to commit to it because, we're trying to keep our water prices low. And, to change it to 15 years instead of 20 is about a 0.5% increase in our assessment. And, it's planning that up front and budgeting for that, I really wonder about it. Another way of doing this, I think, particularly since there's no real time frame that we have to use when we do option 1, is maybe take a look at what we have at the end of the year and say half of that's going to go against my my UAL. That maybe we can do that instead of transferring it all into the general reserve. Say, this is extra money anyhow, let's use it to pay down our unfunded liability. And having some unfunded liability is not bad because it depends on what the market does. You can't tell, and it's better to have the debt there instead of having our customers' money tied up where it doesn't need to be tied up. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Anne, you had another comment, please?
I'm going to tell you, as an undergrad in grad school, I froze on economics. But the value of $1 today versus the value of the dollar in the future, when you present this to the board, the full board, I think it would make sense to refresh us of what $1 today means to $1 in the future on that. And it's why I pay my mortgage extra principal every month. I don't think I'll get 8 years in advance, but, I think it comes down to that principle of the value of $1 today versus the future, and that might help people understand why. I also, at least for the city of Millbrae, where we're paying down our pension funds, it's a considerable savings. It's like big numbers of savings on paying at that right time. So it's not just paying, it's paying at the right time, and I can't tell you what the right time is. We have a finance director for that, but check with them. I really think, maybe I'm the only one that is really fuzzy on economics, but if we could help that with the presentation, I think that would help. Thanks.
Thank you. As I said, this was for us to have this discussion, to look at the numbers. Christina has been wonderful with us on our bond and repayment and saving us money. So this is a good discussion to have because, as was pointed out, we don't have a specific time frame right now. Leslie, please, and then Louis.
I would love to know, Christina, definitely, do not have any background in this, what your preference is between 1 and 2, if you're allowed to say.
Or the reason we made this informational item, not because the board didn't ask staff to make a recommendation, but if you ask me now, I think option 1 would be a preferable option for the agency at this time.
Without any economic background, just a legal background, and I don't know, option 1 just seemed the best to me, just because I think it gives us flexibility. But I definitely defer to people with financial backgrounds. Thank you.
Thank you. That makes me feel better. That was the same question I asked her before. So, Louise.
I guess this revolves around the cost of money. 6.8 is expensive, but we don't know that it's going to continue to be 6.8. So, a long time ago, I used to pay, even for the mortgages, a little bit. But when you pay that amount to reduce the principal, you are depriving yourself from future investment that you could do with the money in your hand. Money in your hand is valuable. Once you release it, it's gone. So I like the idea of looking at it periodically, maybe annually, and you say, okay, I have this kind of money that if I invest it, it's going to give me, 2% or 3%. I can't do without. It's okay, and then you put it because it's giving you the 6.8%. But if the interest rate is going to go down at some point in the future, it may not make no sense, and you hold on to the money. So
Thank you.
that's from an investor standpoint.
Yes. And he does have an economic background. Wonderful. Anne, please.
I think Director Vela brings up a good point. Can we go back in historically? I don't know how long. I leave that to people who know better. Let's go back and see how long, because I could have kept my money in a savings account at 0.02%, or my CD that I think is at 3%, versus paying off a mortgage that sadly was a variable at 5%. So I think there's some moving parts there that, again, when you bring this to the full board, it would be great to go back in history. Let's look at that. I mean, we can't predict the future, but all I've heard for years is how CalPERS has not invested well, or because we're limited in investing on things that would be greater returns. I can't see it going down. But if you had that would help everybody get a better idea. So good point, Bella.
One of the things that we can provide is the return that we're getting on our reserve funds, because really that's the trade-off, right, is whether we want to keep funds in reserve or pay them to CalPERS. And the real return on the reserve funds is quite a bit lower than 6.8. Christina could pull that information for the board meeting, so that you know. Obviously, you don't want to get in a situation where you pull all your, you write a check for $1.2 million out of your reserve, then you're very under-reserved. But that's really the trade-off that you're thinking about is, do I want that money in my reserve, or do I want that money from my agencies in form of an assessment, or do I want to give it to CalPERS?
I would agree. Luis, and then Tom.
Yeah, just a quick comment. And also, from a historical perspective, the past may be good, but it's definitely not going to be a guarantee for the future.
Isn't that what they say on all those past performance is not indicative of future performance? Yeah, but you're right. To show the past may give us what could have helped us. Rear view mirror, 2020.
One thing I would like to say, when we approved our budget last year, we had a 9% increase, and we said the general reserve to budget ratio was 21%, which was just above the 20%
So we have
goal.
to have 20 to
In
30.
fact, now it's 24%, because we carried over money from last year, into the general reserve, so that increased our general reserve balance. So that's one of the reasons I said, let's use 9 last year, because I saw that money was coming in. But now if we can say that extra money, I know I'm not gonna need it for my project because, you know, that was last year's budget. If we can apply that or some of that to reducing this unfunded liability, I think that would be a lot smarter thing to do.
I would agree. And looking at what's, quote, left over and making that decision, do you want 75% of or 25% or 50 to go through? And I think the term unfunded liability should be real clear that that's the point. It's unfunded. Oh, this was good. I appreciate this, and I appreciate Christina. Yes. Did you, if you want to answer some of those questions, please.
I think we probably already addressed some of the questions, but I just have one note we'd like to make here. The savings we presented on the table are present value savings. So we've already incorporated like the money now versus 20 years later, worse. And the other thing is when we calculate the present value savings, we used estimated rate of return of 4.5%, which is close to the current 10-year Treasury bonds rate.
Okay. Thank you so much. And I'm glad we have staff who loves numbers as much as I do. 'Cause that's not everybody's thing. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
I'm gonna pass that down to Tom.
Oh, you're going to pass this down. Oh, yes. You have the power. Thank you. We're going to go on to our CEO reports, and this has been passed to Tom Francis.
Thank you, Choops. Can you hear me all right on this?
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair Hardy. I appreciate the introduction, and while you might not necessarily like numbers as much as others, I'm going to share some more numbers to you now. So, but these are good numbers. The purpose of this little section is to provide a bit of an update as to what our water supply situation is this water year. So, as a reminder, a water year starts in October. That's typically the start of the wet season, and it ends in September of the following year. And we're always interested around this time of year because we've started to see how much rain we've got in the winter, and we're also starting to see how much storage is in our major reservoirs within the San Francisco regional water system. And I do have good news to report. Essentially, if you added all the reservoir storage up and you come up with a percentage of what I would call the total storage that might be available, were they all full, we're at about 86, a little over 86% full. And normally, like if you looked back 30 or more years and did an average, normally we're about 80% full. So we're greater than what we normally are. Storage is excellent in our reservoirs. And you'll see some details now in terms of how much precipitation we've gotten, and it's, I want to say that's been hit or miss. Recently it's more hit. Even tonight it might be more hit.
That's right.
So let's do that now. A lot of times when Steve Ritchie from the SFPUC presents these slides, he just has one on each sheet, and I wanted to kind of condense it a bit just in the interest of time here today. But that bar chart over to the left and on your sheets too, that's the precipitation upcountry or in Hetch Hetchy. And if you look at that, you'll see that some months, particularly November and December, were good from a precipitation perspective. And then other months, you know, most recently January, weren't so good, as well as October wasn't so good. We're really not even halfway through February though, and we've been getting a good amount of precipitation in February, actually more than half of what we normally receive through the month of February. So let's see what happens over the next 2 to 3 months. Usually we finish our precipitation by May. Right now we're at 14 inches total, and the 12-month median is around 30 inches, so not quite half. I'd say, you know, it's kind of a normal year so far, but we'll wait and see. Locally here in the Bay Area, we had even rainier, if you will, rainier months of December and November, at least compared to what we normally see here in the Bay Area. And boy, look at February, we're almost at what we normally receive in February, and again, we're not even at Valentine's Day. And I have a feeling we're gonna get some big movement in that bar chart tonight, maybe, into tomorrow. So it's a good thing, and it bodes well for our water supply picture. And you'll hear more of that as each month progresses. As you know, Steve Ritchie from the SFPUC will be coming to the full board meeting, and we'll get more information. This is another chart. I like this chart because it kind of shows me a little more pictorially how we're doing as of, I don't know, starting in October and working our way through to the end of September from a rainfall, precipitation perspective, and that's over to the left, and snowpack perspective, which is over to the right. I'll just call a couple of things. That big, heavy, dark line, that's the median. You can see that at least as where we stand right now, we're pretty dang close to the median from a precip, although, again, February was pretty dry, so we started to deviate from the median, but now we're back. And on the snowpack, February was not only dry, but it really, what little rain.
I think you meant January.
Or, I'm sorry. Yeah, January was pretty dry, but what little rain, and there wasn't really much, but it also could be a situation where there's some warmer weather. So those are things that we're looking at, but February seems to be cold enough where we're getting a bit more snowpack. We'll see what happens this week as well. But again, pretty close to the median. So again, fairly good news for us in terms of our water supply situation this year. I'll just probably take a pause here just as I kind of finish this up. We've heard from our friends at SFPUC. They've issued sort of I guess I'd say first letter to the water agencies, kind of predicting what this next next year is going to be like, next calendar year from a water supply situation. They don't necessarily see this as being a time where there's going to be any shortfalls in terms of our supply, but they really don't issue a final decision until April. So things look good, and that is documented by the SFPUC as well. So I can pause here and take any questions about the water supply situation.
I can tell you, I know why it's not going to rain till later on tonight, because I brought my umbrella. If I bring my umbrella, it doesn't rain. If I forget it, it will. So just so you know. But that is good numbers. Any questions, any comments?
So I'm going to have Tom do the next item on the CO letter or CO items as well. Tom's been attending some of the workshops and work groups for the Bay Delta, so he's going to give us the update there.
Excellent.
And I'm going to move this closer because I think otherwise I'm leaning over too much. So as our CEO said, I've been attending some meetings of the State Water Resources Control Board, but I'll back up slightly by saying those meetings are called working group meetings that I've been attending, but they're in addition to these broader workshops that the State Board has held. So that's what I'm first going to talk about. The State Water Resources Control Board held 5 workshops starting in November of last year, and their last workshop was in January of this year. And they've dealt more with what we call Phase 2. So Phase 2, as a reminder, is the sort of the Sacramento part of the Bay Delta. Tuolamee's part of Phase 1. But we need to track pretty closely what's happening on Phase 2 as well, because they're really they're melded together about as tight as possible in terms of how the State Board is going to regulation-wise deal with us. So there was 5 workshops. They've included a number of panel presentations, both by State Board staff, but then what I'd call the other parties, whether it's the water utilities, particularly the ones on the Sacramento. And by that, I mean East Bay Mud, as well as just a host of utilities that draw their water from the Sacramento Basin. There's also been NGOs in the room, many of whom have visited us or written us frequently, and then tribal interests, and they sit on panels and have made presentations during these workshops. Significant discussions taking place. Mostly they're talking about to be frank with you, how the state board is looking at developing these. They're no longer really voluntary agreements, at least that's not where they're phrasing this. They're calling them healthy river and landscape agreements for each of the river systems. So it's interesting discussion, a lot of debate as to how the state board should go about developing these, and then ultimately in the permitting or the environmental approvals associated with phase 2. And as a reminder, we have our own for the Tuolumne Healthy River and Landscape Agreement. And so we also want to see those proposals for phase 2, how they'll impact what the state board decides to do for phase 1. So anyway, real technical type discussions during the workshops. And because of that, and because of, I guess I'd say, the disagreement that the state board members saw in the room, they asked the state board staff to hold working group meetings too. So they said, there's some big gaps between what these panels think is needed and what you state board staff think are needed from a voluntary agreement perspective and from other aspects. So hold these working group meetings to try to bridge that gap, or at least to have more discussion. And these are much more technical discussions that are taking place. There's 11 working groups that have been scheduled starting in January, working their way through to early March. So the schedule's, in my mind, pretty quick. They want all these working groups to take place. Those working group meetings are not in person, and so they're all through Zoom. And my next slide's going to talk a little bit about that, so I'm going to kind of hold off on talking more about those working groups. But I'll just say, generally speaking, they've been interesting to attend. They're 2 hours in length. They're all through Zoom. I've sat in on about not quite half of them. It's hard to fit them into schedules. San Francisco staff, though, is sitting in on all of them, and they're reporting back to BAWSCA. So the ones that I can't attend, they brief me on it. They've also been briefing CEO Smagel as well and our attorneys. The ones that I'm most interested in and really can't skip out on are the working group meetings that deal with how they are going to adjust or monitor the success of a particular, and I'll use the term voluntary agreement, how they're going to monitor whether the flow is correct or if the voluntary agreement for the Tuolumne River is succeeding. So it's kind of a, if you will, it's a way of measuring the success over time. And so I'm really in particular interested in that. The state board doesn't necessarily do a lot of commenting. They're just listening to the different debates from the different parties. Their goal, though, I think, is to come up with something that the parties can at least, if not totally embrace, understand as to why it's being proposed. So I know this is kind of delving into a deep topic, but just takeaways for you folks would be a lot of meetings taking place. We're tracking the meetings. Not a lot to report back right now. Probably this spring there'll be more to report back as we understand how the state board and their staff have digested all the discussions taking place in these meetings.
And just to add, one of the critical elements of this is timing, because this is just phase 2. This is looking at the Sacramento River side. We're kind of waiting for the Tuolumne and the San Joaquin River side. So it's really about what do all these meetings and what all these work groups and workshops mean for how long this process is going to go. And as we know, this seems to go on forever, and maybe has gone on forever, but maybe it won't go on forever. So.
I'm just going to say I'm shocked that there's disagreements and disconnect. Everyone's seen Casablanca, right? That there is such a difference in those who are working with entities that need the water and those that are trying to tell us what we don't or do need. That's a bit of a frustration. You made one comment where seeing how it was going to work with these flows. This has been part of my heartburn is how do you measure, you can measure how much the flow is, but how is it working? Do you survey the fish? I'm not certain what you do as to figure out what's working. Is there, you just made that
That's a
passing
lot.
comment,
Yeah, I
and
think
I
that-
thought,
That's
Yeah.
a lot of what's in these work groups.
Yeah. Lot-
Is
lot.
how are we gonna evaluate the success? Are there off-ramps
Yeah.
for healthy rivers and landscapes if they're not working?
Yeah.
How do you determine if they're not working? So these are questions for the proponents of those.
yes, please, Tom.
Yeah,
Chambers.
particularly when there's so many externalities, that other factors that aren't in there. Because really, you know, our voluntary agreements just increases the degrees of freedom. And there's more different things you can do to help the fish. Whereas what the State Quality Resources Control Board says is, it's just flow, because they only know how to control flow. And also, at least, I think it was a year ago, they were talking about for the phase 2, that they were talking about 55% flow for them, not just a 40%. So I guess we can consider ourselves fortunate that we're not in phase 2. But we'll see what happens. That's all I gotta
Well,
say.
to piggyback on your comment about the 55, when I was told it was 40% unencumbered flow, I said, how did they come up with the number? And I remember Nicole telling me, well, they originally wanted 60, so by asking for 40, that's reasonable. Okay. And that's how we came up with the number. So this, I'm glad there's a lot of pushback, because, yeah, it's easy to measure it, the actual flow, but as far as the outcomes, the externalities are probably as hard to base on anything
I suspect we're gonna be talking about this
for a long
For a
time.
while.
to the end of all of our careers,
Yes,
if not longer.
longer. Wonderful, thank you. Well,
we
let's
got-
get to some better news.
Yes, the last piece I want to address is the update on the water supply amendment, Tier 2 plan adoption packet preparation. So just kind of a status update. The Tier 2 plan is complete. Everyone signed off on that from the water management representative perspective. BAWSCA has provided SFPUC and the WMRs with WSA red lines for review. Some of those were provided at the very end of January, so not that long ago. I'm looking at someone who I provided them to. So acknowledging that. So we have been working closely with SFPUC and attorneys at the SFPUC to go through that language. And so we're waiting on more comments back and forth. But the attorneys have been working hard on that. Everybody's trying diligently to do that as fast as they can. The resolution, so a part of this is a packet that will go to the cities and to the water districts and Stanford and Cal Water, which represent resolutions, staff reports, things that can be used in the adoption of the Tier 2 plan, as well as the WSA amendments. So those are drafted and ready to share as soon as we get the final red lines on the WSA. The SFPUC staff currently anticipates bringing the WSA amendment to SFPUC in April, and we're hoping that that date can stick. That's the goal at the moment. And the wholesale customers are going to most likely have to wait until after that approval. I think what we're hopeful of is that we can get that date certain on the agenda, whatever date that happens to end up being, that we'll know a little bit ahead of that, and we can get the cities to start working on getting it as an agenda topic after it's scheduled with SFPUC. That's the current plan, to get a little wiggle room, because obviously from the perspective of the minimum purchase quantity agencies, we'd really like to get this done by the end of this fiscal year, if at all possible, in whatever way possible. So that is, we're moving down the tracks on this. And I don't know, Allison, Judy, do you have anything else? I covered it well? Okay. That's my report on that item.
If we pay Allison by the word, that was really good. We got a thumbs up. So, yes, please, Ann, I think time frame is what we're all
Yeah.
questioning.
Budget implications. So cities are working on their budgets March, April. Mine usually tries to finalize in May. Whatever happens, whatever plans, fine, but it's the budget implications. Or should we be telling every city or district to leave a block for an estimated cost?
So the estimated cost with respect to the removal or reduction of the minimum purchase quantities is very small. I think it was, I forget now who got, I think it's Danielle. I'm looking for Danielle. She's not here. But I think it was less than 0.5% on the water rate. We've been given a preliminary water rate estimate from San Francisco, and that range is anywhere from, I think, about 1% to 6%. So it's a pretty big range at the moment. We'll get a closer to a final number from them, maybe another update in at the wholesaler meeting next week, and then a final rate that comes out from them, I think in April or May. So right now it's all within that range, I would say. So when the city is budgeting, you've got to consider that full range that's out there right now.
Okay.
But this should not be the most significant impact to the budget.
It's just the timing, that's all.
Right.
Okay,
Thank you. I could see you were waiting to hear a time frame.
I was, but it's really just the financial impact because we can make an estimate rather than have to do a budget augment in July.
Yeah.
Right.
Mostly, when I was asking about this, it was when is this going to happen, and so that we can have this. We only have 26 entities to go to, and making certain that it happens in a timely manner so that we can put this in place. The reality is we've been just giving ourselves a year each time for the old plan until we can get this in place. And I know we all want to see this happen before we have another drought, because it'll happen. Thank you. Leslie, please.
I know you know this, but I just want to emphasize that in the presentation for the cities and towns, just to really emphasize the unanimity that's required and the fact that all our entities have already signed off. Our representatives that know what they're doing have signed off, just so our individual councils don't want to start rethinking things, if that makes sense.
I've never seen a city council want to redesign an entire project from the dais. Oh, that's right, I have. And I had the same question because I asked, could this just go on consent? And depending on your entity, it can, and staff, BAWSCA staff is still willing to be there and have slides and answer questions. Those of us who are very steeped in this water policy, we have a lot of colleagues who are not. And helping them to understand everything that's gone into this and also what the unhealthy ramifications could be if it did not pass, I think is important. Thank you. Leslie, and then Ann.
I just want to add, I think, and every town is different. I feel like if it's on consent for us, it will get pulled because people want to know more. People are very curious, especially about water. But yeah, that's individual, obviously.
Yeah.
And BAWSCA staff intends to be at all these city council meetings, water district meetings, as requested, and even in backup. Even if the staff says we've got this, we'll send somebody anyway, just in case somebody has a question the staffer can't answer. Tom or I or Danielle or all of us in some cases might be at that. Depending on the
Yes.
depending on the city.
Since our council meeting didn't end until 1:45 last night, here's a suggestion. Make certain that you get put at the beginning of the agenda. It was painful. Please,
Just
Ann.
Chair Hardy brought up a point. I think there's a phenomenal number of brand-new elected officials, definitely in San Mateo County, which I'm more familiar with, which to me means that staff reports have to have more information written at a more basic level. And I would say that for my city, there's 3 brand-news. One of them does not read English very well. So I really think we need to consider that there's so many new people that we're going to have to hold their hands for that. And that will save a lot of time. It will be totally new for them.
I would agree with that, and that might be something each one of our BAWSCA representatives can take upon themselves in an appropriate way without the Brown Act reality, but helping shepherd that through and helping all our colleagues to recognize the importance of this, and maybe working with our staff and getting a really good short report on consent. I know that's what I'm hoping for. Excellent. It's so nice to be able to see the light at the end of this tunnel. Okay, I think we have, everything else was more of an attachment. Tom, is that correct?
Correct, yeah. Happy to take any questions about the items that were in CO letter, but.
Allison, please.
I was just gonna say, the closed session.
Yes. Yeah, I did mention, we have canceled closed session. You are caught up. We know nothing. Now you're completely caught up. Because legal matters move through so quickly. And there's never any delays. And we always know exactly what's going to happen. All of those are nots. So at this point, when there is something, we will definitely let you know, because we meet every 2 months. If there's a update that is of use, that will go on the next general meeting, and we'll have a closed session. But when we talked with the attorney, it was, I'm here, and I'm watching everything. So we have canceled the closed session for today. So you don't even have a report out from closed session. Any comments or concerns or announcements? Yes, please. Yeah, comments by committee members. Please, Ann, and then Barbara.
In reading what happened in January, I had a question on the bond surcharge and some background. All of us who are also with a city hat on, we pay a lot of things sometimes put on us. So at least while I was still on council, we have a page on our finance page that talks about OPEG or other things and their payment structures on that. And I wondered if BAWSCA had anything, any language written about the bond surcharge, how far it's going out. I mean, it's getting close to being paid off. Relatively speaking, it's pretty exciting. My long-term question would be, will people see a rate reduction? I don't believe that would happen, but that's what our public is going to think. So if we think about public education and that each of us have to go back to our member agencies and say why, if there's some language on there, this is another thing on I'm no longer on council, but I'm going to do anyway because it's good for the public to have a better understanding, just to think about. And I'm doing that for any of the bonds that we are paying off, any of those kind of things that are sitting out, because I'm the one that has to say, really, you're getting a good deal on your water on that. And now that I'm not elected, I can say, and you know, it's cheaper than buying that 6-pack of water, which I couldn't do as an elected.
Well,
so anything that can help with education, I'm a big believer in education, Tom, if you cannot tell. So as a former instructor, thank you.
No, I appreciate that. And sometimes we can say, look, you didn't have an increase. And that's a positive thing. And trust me, when I fight with Valley Water over, they said, we didn't have a double-digit increase, it's only 9.9. Yes, thank you. Barbara, please.
I'm getting old, and when you have charts, could you make them bigger? Find a way to squeeze the columns, but make the make the fonts bigger.
Understood.
couple of those.
Understood. We have the advantage of looking at it on a Microsoft Word that you can
Unlike-
blow up or whatever.
Yeah, so-
I'll take that note.
Thank
Okay,
you,
yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, Tom's doing the charts himself now. And so I thought, you need to shuffle that off,
Well-
bigger fonts.
He sees better than maybe some of the rest of us. I will say, when I started teaching, I went to a teacher onboarding, and they realized that they had put the print so small you couldn't read it. So they said, that's okay, we printed you out papers, but they wanted to say paper, so they put 6 per page. So you couldn't read it, and so they read it to us. And I remember turning to another new teacher and saying, I get it, this is a what not to do. So that's not too bad if we're just asking for a little bit bigger print. I think from a legal point of view, you can't have it smaller than 10 points or it's not, but I like 12. Because all of us are getting more mature. Wonderful. And I'd like to adjourn the meeting. I'd like to thank you all, and we think we'll be back in the community center. That is the plan.
We're getting nods from the
Yes,
background.
but I'm so glad you all made it, and when I found out we were gonna change, I said, please put something out to make really clear to everyone, different room, and please give us some information about the parking, because I've never seen parking to be a problem on the peninsula. There was a really good joke I heard when I first moved here. Someone came up to me and said, I had a parking place in San Francisco once. And I didn't realize that was the punchline. So we'll adjourn our meeting. We'll see you April 9th, 1:30. Thank you so much, and don't get wet.